I was laying on a raft in Thailand in this gorgeous pool, surrounded by palm trees, looking up at the sky, thinking to myself, wow, I can't believe this is my life. Just a few days before, I had celebrated a day I had always dreamed of, my wedding day, and there I was on the other side of the world with my husband on my honeymoon. But when I was 26 years old, I had every reason to believe that this day would never happen, because my life looked very different. I had never been in a serious romantic relationship. I had this belief that food made me fat, so I would eat fat-free foods, and I found these fat-free brownies at the local deli, and some days I would just spend the whole day eating 4 fat-free brownies for breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner. So as you can imagine, this was not helping me think clearly at all. I was filled with worry, anxiety, and doubt, so much so that I could barely sleep at night. And I would just be thinking, and overthinking some more as if that would help me any, which I'm sure maybe some of you can relate. So I would drink alcohol or take Ambien, sometimes even both, just so I could get a few hours of sleep and wake up for work the next day. And I was working at this job that I hated. It was a mobile marketing company. And there was one thing that I knew, and that was that every day when I got into work, I had to do these marketing reports. So I would pull up the Excel file, and I would punch in the numbers, and then spend the rest of the day G-chatting with my friends. And anytime my boss walked by, I would just simply hide the screen and make it look like I was working. And I had this really strict Italian boss, and her name was Antonella. And she smoked cigarettes and drank espresso all day, and she was so stressed out and busy with work that she didn't notice that I was making mistakes, and neither did I. Until one day, when we were in this conference room and we had a meeting, and I was sitting there, spaced out as usual, and it was, one of those long white tables, and I was kind of gazing up at the fluorescent lights. And then, all of a sudden, I heard my name, and Antonella said, Anna, you didn't do the reports right. What have you been doing this entire time? And it woke me up, literally. I felt a jolt in my stomach, and I knew that I was in the wrong place. Because deep down inside, I had this desire. I knew that I wanted to help people. And growing up, I was a tennis player, and I grew up with great coaches. And so I had heard about this thing called life coaching. But I wasn't really listening. But this was my wake-up call. So it wasn't long before I broke up with my long-term relationship of 3 months, and I enrolled in coaching school, and I started taking steps to change my life. I even hired a life coach to help me. And so things were definitely improving. I started working on myself. I started going to yoga and meditation and acupuncture. And, I was planting seeds to grow my business, and I started a website called Self in the City because I figured if I needed help, there were lots of people out there that needed it too. So I started taking action, and things were definitely improving. I was feeling more at peace. I could tell that I was thinking more positively. I started eating food with fat in them, like coconuts and avocados. So I was sleeping better at night, and still working really hard, and I had this vision on building my business. But things weren't really happening that much. And for the next 2 years, I was still jumping from apartment to apartment, job to job. I had no man in my life and no money. And by the time I was 28, I had lived in 8 apartments, I had 10 jobs, and I was still focused on this vision. And then I was in this temporary lease with this apartment, and it was 6 months lease. And my roommate came up to me and she said, Anna, we're not going to renew the lease anymore. And I just looked at her and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to move again. This can't be happening to me. So I just had this blank stare, and I looked at her and I said, okay, I'll see you later. And I left the apartment, I went to the gym. And I was standing there in the locker room, and I just felt so defeated, and I didn't know what to do. And so my mind was racing once again, and tears started to well up in my eyes, and my thoughts were like, Anna, things just aren't working out for you. Maybe you should just move home with your parents and give up. And it really seemed like the logical thing to do. But then I stopped, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I said, I believe in you. And I said, what do you want? And then I heard, and I said, I want to stay in New York, and I want to have my own coaching business. And then I told myself I could create it. And so when I left the gym that day, I felt like a different person. Instead of feeling like a victim to these circumstances, I felt empowered, and I started to take action. So 1 month later, I got my own apartment, and I went on a blind date, and 3 months later, I was making more money with my coaching business than I had at any of the jobs that I had. And so if I had listened to that voice on autopilot in my head, I would have never met the guy that I went on the blind date with, which was my husband. So here I am, 5 years later, living a very different life. And for the past 5 years, I've been helping people uncover their inner vision and giving them the tools to do so. So many of you might have felt like you are just in the wrong place or feeling like life isn't going down the direction that you want it to go. And so what you want to do is you want to first just recognize that there's this voice in your head that's on autopilot. And maybe you've been doing some work on yourself, some spiritual development, some yoga and things like this. But what you really want to do is recognize that you have this voice in your head that's full of lies. And that's really what it is to be awakened, is to recognize this unconscious pattern that tells you all the things that you've done wrong, why you shouldn't do that thing that you want to do, and why you're not good enough. And it's negative, it's on repeat, and it just doesn't stop. So first, you just want to recognize it. Then you want to ask yourself, what do I want? And that's a tricky question. Some people spend their entire lives never really asking themselves this question. So you want to ask yourself, what do I want? And at first you might hear, I don't know. And then you just recognize that that's that voice on autopilot in your head. And when you recognize it, you begin to have power over it. And you name it. Name the demon in your head. And then you connect to the deeper part of you. And you ask yourself, what do I really want? And I don't know is one of the biggest excuses that we make up for ourselves. It gives us a free pass right there. As soon as we say, I don't know, we don't have to figure it out. So dive deeper into the inner knowing. And you might hear something that might be a little bit scary. It might be, I want to have my own business, or I want to, write a screenplay, or I'm in the wrong relationship. And it can be scary. So the next step is just to take some small, immediate action. So it's a very gentle practice of interrupting this pattern of getting off autopilot, and by asking yourself, by taking these 3 action steps. And it's first asking yourself, what do I want? Asking yourself, what can I do to create it? And then lastly, taking some immediate small action to do that. And if you do that over time, because that's what I was doing for those 2 years, that didn't really seem like anything was popping up, but I was constantly tuning in to what is it that I want, what can I do to create it? And it was in that moment that a very big shift happened for me. So if you feel like your raft in Thailand is still so far away from you, it's really that you want to get off just drifting down this unconscious stream and interrupt that pattern. So take yourself off autopilot and go consciously in the direction of your dreams.